turns out I'm a very evil, I don't know, demon of some sort. And I turn to you, and I say, I'm going to give you the following option. Either you kill this person, you go over there and just kill her, or I'm going to kill all these people. Would you kill her to prevent the death of all these people? You don't have to kill them. I'm going to kill them. You have to actively kill her. It's the only way to save these people. What do?
No idea.
Well, if you say, yeah, I would kill the one. I would actually kill the one to prevent this mad woman from killing all these others. If that's what you would do, you're a utilitarian. If you say, look, I'm very sorry that these people are going to die, but it's so wrong to kill that I won't do it, not even to save the lives of others. I won't sacrifice her. I won't use her to achieve the good of all these lives being saved. If that's your answer, then you're a rights-based ethicist.
And what if I say, I won't kill anybody because it benefits me more than
Then I'm killing the whole lot of you. Gotta be careful dealing with even.
Well, there's a third choice.
Yeah, what if she kills
Kill the
you?
demon.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, a very powerful evil demon. So what would you do in that situation?
But one's not right, or one's not better than the other.
Yeah, but you gotta make a decision.
So you wouldn't be basing it on
On what?
you wouldn't say, well, this one's better than the other, so I'm going to do it this way. It's more of a personal. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you can't.
One choice is not better than the other.
Yeah, so
They're both bad. It's a dilemma.
exactly that.
Yeah,
it's
they're
a
both awful.
heck of a lot. Either way you go, it's going to be one of those. But I was just saying, it's if you do the which one's better, the benefits or whatever. Of course, like you said, it's utilitarian, but.
Which one should you go with, the rights-based or the utilitarian?
Yeah.
I mean, if I tell you that it's better to maximize social good, then it's okay. But if you have to decide,
That's
let me
the
ask you.
question I think people are wanting. They want the answer, which one's better.
If I knew that, I would be God, not a lowly professor. Let me ask you this question, and then at least we'd know that God exists. Let me ask you this question: do you think torture is bad, wrong, immoral? What about torture of a 3-year-old child? Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, what a horrible example. People tell me after my classes they have nightmares. So, would you torture a 3-year-old? Cause him intense, horrible pain that they'll probably never recover from. The psychological scars will be horrible. No. What if their father was blowing up junior highs? And you find out, you're the chief of police for some reason, I don't know, you are. And you find out that this guy has planted bombs in every junior high in Laramie. And there's not enough, for whatever reasons, there's not enough time to evacuate the junior highs. And you actually have this guy in custody. If he'll just tell you the code, you can disarm all the bombs immediately. And you've got like 30 seconds, I don't know, 5 minutes, it doesn't matter, whatever time you need to make the story work. You actually torture this guy. Would you torture this guy to get him to give you the information? I would. I have no hesitation. Man, I'm torturing. I'm the director of the Ethics Center. But let's say he doesn't crack, right? Torture him all you want. He's never going to give you that information. But he has a 3-year-old child that he loves more than anything else in the world. The only way to get him to give you that information is to torture the child. Would you do it?
That's almost the exact same.
Yeah.
Well, you could. I mean, personally, I just couldn't. I mean,
And
it
now-
might save
now-
lives, but physically, I just couldn't do that to a
Okay.
child.
This is what we were talking about at the beginning, though. Just going on gut instinct or hunch or anything. What I want to know is not, what are you so squeamish you can't do, but what's the right thing to do?
Didn't we just say that torturing young children is not a good thing?
It isn't. But we also think pain is bad, but sometimes there's pain, and it's morally legitimate, if there's compensating benefit. Is the benefit in this case significant enough to justify the pain brought upon an innocent? I mean, if we torture the father, he deserves it. But torturing the child?
That's just it. It's the person who's doing the torturing. You might be able to live with torturing an older person because that person has a better understanding what's going on, but the child doesn't, so they can.
So let's say that I'm the person who has to make the decision to torture the child. Let you off the hook. I have to make that decision. If I do this, it will destroy me. Not only will the child have psychological scars her whole life, because it's going to be some horrible torture. I mean, what you want to do, of course, is to rig it so the father thinks you're torturing the kid, but you're not. But let's say that's not an option. You don't get the easy outs. Don't change my stories. If I do this to this child, it will so horrify me that it will destroy my life. Do I have an obligation to humanity to destroy my life and that child's life in order to save? Because it's not just the kids, it's all their families.
Without getting emotionally involved, you don't always have to.
Can I not get emotionally involved in something like
There's always
that?
a consequence.
But now the question is, can I let how it's going to affect me be the deciding factor? I just couldn't. Do I have a moral obligation to do it?
I think no matter what decision you make, you're going to be messed up because now you've got the lives of all these other children.
Yeah, no matter what, I'm a donor.
Right.
So what should I do?
I think you have to save all those other children. What if all these bombs blow up and you've got all these kids that are not necessarily dead but psychologically damaged? Now you've got more.
And so I can either have one horribly messed up little child or hundreds.
Or both could happen. You know, you could go through with your
Torture and not save the kids. No, don't change my story. It's possible. It's possible, but I don't want to deal with real life. This is a situation. I can save them if I do this to her. Is it worth doing it to her? What were you going to say?
I was going to say the exact same thing.
If we're talking about one destroyed little girl or hundreds of destroyed little children, how can you justify putting the one above the many? But on the other hand, how can you justify using one person? Period. This is why we sincerely hope there is a God in heaven to make it all right in the end. Now, when I talk about this stuff to other groups, and one of the main groups I talk with is medical ethics, doctors and nurses, etc. I used to be on a medical ethics committee for a hospital, not here. Otherwise there'd be breach of confidentiality somewhere else. And I remember there was a case that was brought to the ethics board. And there was a man who got sick, and there was a possibility it would get more serious, but at the moment he was fine. And he was in his 60s, so he wasn't that old at all, very competent and everything else. And he had just married a woman, second marriage, third marriage, something, in her 40s. So, you know, both mature adults, no question. When he was thinking about the possibility the disease was going to get significantly worse, he talked with his wife, again, a woman in her 40s. He talked with his doctor. He talked with his family, his kids from the first marriage, and said, human dignity is really important to me. And given the illness I have, there's a possibility I could just go into this vegetative coma state and be fed on a machine. He said, I don't want that. I don't want the ventilator down my throat. I don't want to go and suffer through the dementia and have my family see me like this. I don't want it. I've had a very good life. I've only been married to my new wife for a couple of years. It's been wonderful. But if this is the hand I am dealt, here's how I want it played out. Very clear. Sure enough, he had the bad diagnosis. And within 6 months, he was very bad. He had slipped into a state where he could not communicate, he was suffering from the dementia, and he was no longer going to be able to stay alive on his own. It was time for putting the tubes to intubate him, the tubes down his throat, hooking him up to machines, the whole bit. Now, everyone knew he didn't want this. The wife went to the doctor and said, I can't let him go. I can't do this. Put him on the machine. And the doctor said, absolutely, of course. There was a nurse involved, and the nurse was horrified. And the nurse brought the case to the Ethics Center. And the doctor said, look, the wife wasn't coping with it well. It was for her sake we went against his wishes. She just needed more time to adjust. So this man had done to him exactly what he said he did not want to have happen. And the justification for it was because it was easier on the wife. Okay? Now, when this case was brought to the ethics board, there was a lawyer on the ethics board and there was me, and both of us went ballistic. And what we said was, you have committed assault and battery on a human being. That this was in fact a criminal assault. Because the tubes and all are very violent in what happens to the body when all this goes on. We said, this is assault and battery. I didn't say that. I said, you've violated his rights. You've interfered with his autonomy. The lawyer said, this is assault and battery. The doctor said, no. It's what the wife wanted. And I did it because it would be easier on her. I was taking her into consideration. And the lawyer and I said, but you don't get to do that. You don't get to use people against their wishes in a way which is beneficial to other people. And the doctor said, I'm the doctor, he's the patient, I get to make these decisions. To which the lawyer and I responded, why is it that just because this person is sick, he no longer has rights? Now, if he hadn't said anything ahead of time, and the wife had to make the decision, that's one thing. He was in a state where he could no longer make the decision for himself, the decision was made by someone else. He said, though, when I'm in this state, this is how I want to be treated. Now, suppose you're in a relationship, and the person you're in the relationship with says, you know, it would be so much easier for me if you'd quit your job. You say, I don't want to quit my job. So he says, you know, I'm thinking about my wife, I just can't bear her working. So he calls up and calls your boss and says she's resigning, you know, she's quitting. You would be appalled, right? Isn't this exactly what happened to this man? He had done to him something he didn't want to have done to him so that it would benefit his wife. Well, it's lovely if he had said, honey, if I get sick, I want you to do what makes you happy. I want you to do what works for you. That would have been a nice thing for him to have done, actually. I'm going to be in a state where it's not going to matter to me. If you're more comfortable keeping me, keep me. If you're more comfortable letting me go, let me go. But he didn't. He said, let me go. So the point here is, when you treat other people, when you interact with other people, you've got to keep in mind that they're human beings and they have rights. And you have to then understand why rights are so important. Because otherwise you're just being used. And your life is being basically viewed as something which isn't important enough, even though it's all you may ever have. It's still not important enough for you to get to live it. You don't like that, do you?
Well, no, I'm just thinking of how sometimes people say, oh, well, it's not right. They want that kind of thing. And sometimes I think mix up immediate pleasure.
Yeah.
Or-
Rights have to do with protecting autonomy. The mere fact that you want to do something by no means gives you a right to it. And in fact, the rights you have are very, very, very narrow. You don't have a right to this, you don't have a right to that, you don't have a right to a gazillion things. What you have a right to do is to live your life in such a way that it isn't depriving you of having the only meaningful experience you may ever have. That sounded really vague, didn't it?
Well,
But that's the answer. You have to distinguish between what you have a need and what you have a wish. And you have no rights to those things you wish for. You only have rights to those things you need, such that without that you will be seriously harmed. And that's how you draw that distinction. And how you want to die is something you probably have a right over, not just a mere wish. So, I was actually going to go on a feminist rant, but I've run out of time. Think about this. In the medical profession, they tend to pigeonhole people. And once a person gets pigeonholed as a patient, they are viewed as having less rights. If you're going to go off and work in the professional arena and counsel clients, remember clients are first persons and do not pigeonhole them. And now my feminist rant. If you are in a relationship, if you're in a marriage and you are a wife is just a label. You are a person and you have rights. And utility, you want what is the greatest good. But if you're uncomfortable sacrificing someone for the greatest good, you should probably also be uncomfortable sacrificing yourself for the greater good of the family. It's a rights utility issue, even on that scale. And then worry about justice. Treat equals equally for the distributions of the benefits and burdens of marriage. Well, the burdens are doing all the work, doing all the compromising, and losing yourself a sense of self. Those are the burdens.
but there's some negative consequences of that on other
There's a
people
lot
as
of
well.
negative, yeah, and then it just starts getting more and more complicated. But remember that each member is equal, and no one should automatically just have to assume a greater share of the burden.
Thanks so much. Now, does that give you a lot to think about in terms, and a lot you could write about in our discussion?
I've asked Patty Brewer, who's a extension educator in Bighorn County in Wyoming, to come and talk with you this week, since we're dealing with values and ethics and attitudes. And Patty and I talked about doing this about a year ago. She has traveled several times internationally, and she just has a great experience to share with you. And so, Patty, would you share with the students some of what you learned from your experience of traveling internationally and meeting people?
I'd be glad to. Well, I just feel like this is an honor to be able to talk to you, and I feel like I have been given a gift in being able to work in third world countries. And I feel like when we have this opportunity that we need to give back. So hopefully in a few minutes I will encourage you. I have a list, and I just have a few minutes, and so I will just hit the high points this morning. But I guess at the top of my list would be, this gets you out of your comfort zone. Really gets you out of your comfort zone. But you need to be practical at the same time. But then I think those of us who go work in third world countries, I don't know if practicality is always it's definitely not our highest priority. But I think that the fact that we love people, and we do want to make a difference in our world. And last year I spent a month in Russia, not a year but a month, and it seems like a dream now. But the friendships that I made there will be lifelong and everlasting. And every place I go, I have the same sense of meeting friends, and it seems like I've known them forever. One of the things I think that we gain, those of us who work internationally, is the personal growth. And you're just never the same again. And I was sharing the other day with someone, I kind of laugh about it now. I had worked in third world countries, and I was, as an extension educator in Wyoming for 2 or 3 years, I had made the comment, well, that was in another part of my life, and I'll never do that again. Well, I laugh about that now, because I think once you have it in your blood, it's there forever. And you do okay for a while, but then you've got to go have another challenge, and it is challenging. But the world becomes not such a big place. And I think probably one of the most wonderful things that I have learned is that, and it's a challenge to me no matter what culture I ever go to, I'm fascinated with different cultures. The fact that we have so many more similarities than we do differences. And I think many times we concentrate so much on our differences, but we have so many similarities. And I think the fact to respect that, respect your traditions, and if you go work in another country, be sure that you have done your homework. And one of the things that you need to make sure and do is to learn their customs, learn the way they are, and to respect that. Now, you might not agree with some of the things that you see, but that is their culture. And one thing that I have found in working with other people is if you don't respect them, they won't. And as you learn to understand their culture and really learn to love those people, love is something that can't be defined, but when you don't have it, people know it, but when you love people, they know. And if you can go and really learn to love those people, you're a magnet, and they will feel that, and then they will want to listen to what you have to say. Another thing that's very important for us when we go is to really be prepared and be very professional. I have worked up in the mountains in the Philippines where things were very primitive, and it was amazing to me even there how they felt that education was important, and I felt even there it was my obligation to be very professional in what I did, but also very warm and loving to those people. One of the biggest challenges I had one time was a group of mothers. I'm in family life and development, and I was speaking to a group of mothers, and most of them had large families. And when I began the lecture, I thought, how am I ever going to be able to communicate to them? But as I began to share with them and realized, they have the same heart as the mothers I do, how that before the hour was over, they began to relax. And by the time it was over, there weren't very many differences in that room. Maybe materialistically, but that's one of the low priorities when you work in third world countries. I think one of the stories that best describes how I feel, and I feel very blessed as a person that I have had the privilege to have the father that I did. My brother was a missionary in Africa for 20 years, and in his first term he was in Tanzania, which was a very, very poor country. And my mother and father went to visit my brother and his wife. And I remember my father coming back and telling me this story, that one day they were out on the game reserve and they were just walking along and they came upon an African man, a very old man, and he lived in a little hut. And my father explained the only thing that he had in front of his hut was just a little bowl that he ate out of. And with tears in my father's eyes, he said, that man taught me something. And I thought, well, because, everybody is of value. And we can learn something from anyone if we're watching. I think sometimes we as Americans, we get labeled as the ugly American, which is always kind of shameful to me, but sometimes we deserve it. Because in our materialism and in our great wealth that we have in our country, sometimes we look down upon other people, but they see that, and if we do that, then we will not reach them. So everyone has something to give, and everyone can teach us something if we have a teachable heart. And I hope that I do. Communication is probably the biggest hurdle that we have, and sometimes that's a worry to us. Now, when I went to Russia, I didn't know how to speak Russian, but I took my dictionary wherever I went, and they were wonderful. I love the Russian people. Well, I love every place I go, I love the people. I learned to really love the people. But I would take my dictionary, and they would work with me, and it was a barrier, but if you want to communicate, you will find ways. And sometimes it's almost laughable to us, the way that we communicate, but you can communicate. So you don't always have to know the language, but always take a dictionary. And another thing that I do is, there's all kinds of wonderful books out there now on the different countries, their different cultures, what they eat, and all of their different little things that they do, just like we do in America that we take for granted. And you need to spend time learning those things and respect when you're in that country. I think of the term, it's an old one, when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do, and there's a lot of truth to that. If you don't respect their customs, you're not going to be able to reach them. And when I was in Russia, I was teaching workshops on creativity and leadership. And I remember in the classroom, sometimes some of the students would ask me, well, what did you think of Lenin? Well, what do you think of communism? Well, big question. And I was very careful in answering that, but I did not want to be negative with them. But rather what I did is I taught on leadership, and I taught on different kind of leadership styles, and they understood and they got it. But if I would have put down their government, and it would have been very easy to do as an American, I would have lost the students. So I try to be very respectful of where they're at, where they have been, and where they're going. And I think it really helped in trying to reach those wonderful students. I think, like I said before, when you go to another country and you've had that privilege, I think one of the responsibilities is to come back and pay your dues. And one of the things that I have done since returning from Russia is I go out and I speak at different groups. And I was so touched by the soulishness of the Russian people. They would sing old American songs, and they would quote these wonderful old poems. And I came home thinking, you know, when I was a girl, we used to sing a lot more. So I've come home and I've been singing a lot more. And when I go out and do a Russian presentation, I always find myself closing with just belting out God Bless America. And the thing that I have found is usually the audiences stand up and sing with me and they cry because we do have so much to be grateful for. And, you know, we were just born here. It wasn't really our special privilege, but we could have been born in another country. We could have been born in so many situations, but we are in America, and so we have so much to give. And I think one of the things that working in third world countries does for us is you come home and you're so thankful. And I guess in my own life, one of the things that's the most concern to me is I want to be a thankful person, and I want to be thankful for the little things. And when you go over and you find yourself in some of those situations and you get completely out of your comfort zone, literally, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable, when you come home, you have grown, and you have grown in character. And you're never quite the same again. And that's one of the greatest privileges, I think, that we have of working in other situations where people don't have all the things that we do, is you come home and you appreciate it. Even going to the grocery store and having food there. You appreciate the car that you drive. You appreciate everything. So your life is richer. So those of us who work internationally, especially in situations where life is so much harder, I just have to describe us, we're rich. We are really rich, and it enriches your life. And so I love working internationally. I know I will do it again. I go for a little while, and then I get the bug, and I go. And I'm just going to close and just say that the respect, really respecting other people, and having the challenge of how am I going to communicate with that person, and how am I going to see them for the valuable person that they are probably the most, I suppose, the priorities. Those are my highest priorities in going overseas and being very professional and taking knowledge to them that will make their life richer. Thank you.
Good.